Hello, viewers, and welcome to Exploring Cinema with Brian Meadows. I, of course, am Brian. Today's review is on the final film in the Captain America trilogy, Captain America: Civil War. Based on the popular 2006 Marvel Comics separate storyline Civil War, the film is set maybe a couple of years after Captain America: The Winter Soldier, where disagreement over international oversight of the Avengers by the United Nations fractures them into opposing factions, one being led by Steve Rogers, otherwise known as Captain America, and the other one being led by Tony Stark, or Iron Man. So this film actually has a very special place in my heart, and I'm actually going to ramble for a bit, but around the time this came out, I was actually going through a bit of a rough time, admittedly because I wasn't having the greatest time at work. I had just gotten out of a very emotionally abusive relationship, and I was feeling very alone as a person. But the one thing that kept my spirits up was that I was gonna soon go down to Florida to visit my parents for an entire month after not seeing them for almost 2 years. So one of the first things that we did when I first met up with them was that first week we went to the AMC theaters at Disney Springs in Orlando, which was formerly known as Downtown Disney. And we watched Captain America: Civil War in one of their fork and screen theaters. And for those of you who don't have an AMC nearby and don't know what a fork and screen is, it's where you sit down in the theater and then there are tables in front of you and waiters come to take your order before the film starts, and you can actually get a full lunch or dinner with the meal. It's basically like Alamo Drafthouse, except more family friendly. And if you guys ever have the chance to sit in a fork and screen theater, I highly encourage it. It is one of the best movie experiences I've ever had, and the food is actually really good. Prices are a little high, but as long as you don't go all the time, everything should be fine. But like I said, I'm rambling a little bit, but let's get back to the film itself. This film was different from any of the other standalone movies in the MCU because of the amount of characters that we already knew who reprised their respective roles in the universe, which it's mainly Avengers cast. But this is still primarily a Captain America story. They're just along for the ride. So what I'm going to do a quick talk about each main character, and if you haven't seen the movie, there's a lot, and I'm just going to give quick thoughts on their performances, but be warned, I will be talking as though all of you who are watching have seen Captain America: Winter Soldier, because part of what happened in there is actually very crucial to what's going on in this movie. So, as I will try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, there will be spoilers for Captain America: Winter Soldier, so you have been warned. But honestly, if you haven't seen Winter Soldier yet, what the hell, man? Go and watch it and then come back. Please don't ruin the movie for yourself. Chris Evans comes back to reprise his role as Captain Steve Rogers, and I honestly feel that he just gets better and better with each film. In this film, Cap is leading the faction of the Avengers who are against the regulation and international government oversight, and this man, they've taken the character from being the most rah-rah company man to a somewhat willing propagandist to an insurgent, meaning that he started off being a patriot who followed orders without questions, to have his faith in his government shaken in the Winter Soldier, and the captain we see now does not trust what political sight could bring. Robert Downey Jr. reprises his role as Tony Stark in this film, and he gave my absolute favorite performance that he has ever given in this universe. He is Tony Stark. In this film, Stark actually leads the faction of Avengers who support the regulation. But with Stark's egomania and regret for all of the destructive incidents that have been caused by him and the other Avengers, he is brought to a point in his life where he's honestly just willing to submit to any authority where he felt it was the right thing to do. I especially loved how the film references back to previous films in the universe and how they actually shaped the two main characters and their motivations throughout, and how they were originally polar opposites of each other as far as where they started, and now they have to become what the other used to be. like for instance, Stark is going from becoming resistant to cooperative, and Rogers is going from being cooperative to resistant. Scarlett Johansson reprises her role as Natasha Romanoff, otherwise known as the Black Widow, and in this film she's allied with Stark. Johansson gave her character a more humanistic performance compared to her performance in The Winter Soldier, and even the other two Avengers films that came before. At this point, Natasha has decided she can make her own decisions without having others in the decision-making process for her. She's definitely the most level-headed of the Avengers, and she mainly joins up with Stark because she just wants to find a way to keep the Avengers together, and she feels that the best way to do that is to support regulation for the moment. Or at least, she even uses this kind of analogy. It's like, even if we keep one hand on the steering wheel, we can still drive. You guys get what I mean. But out of all the characters outside of Stark and Rogers, I feel that Black Widow has been given the most character development in this universe, and it definitely shows in this film. Sebastian Stan reprises the role of James Buchanan Bucky Barnes, otherwise known as the Winter Soldier, a physically enhanced, brainwashed assassin allied with Rogers, who was also Rogers' best friend growing up. This character is the main reason for my spoiler warning, because his identity is very important to the previous Captain America film. But anyway, this time around, Stan is playing both versions, and in Almagram, basically a mixture of both characters. He has more lines this time, and has way more emotional depth as well. And it's mainly due to Stan's performance that the character works. His role is probably the most important in the story, but I will not spoil why, just in case you haven't seen this movie. Anthony Mackie, or Clarence, as everybody knows, reprises his role as Sam Wilson, aka Falcon. Excuse me. And for those of you who saw Winter Soldier, you knew that he would obviously be allied with Rogers in this film. With the two, there's this mutual respect, a soldier's respect. He respects and admires Rogers because he earned his rank as opposed to sitting in an office and just delegating orders, and he actually comments a little bit on it in the film, mostly subtly, but you can see that he really doesn't like those normal officers that sit behind a desk. And with Barnes back in the picture, it actually forces Wilson to question the dynamic and relationship that he has with Rogers going forward. Don Cheadle reprises the role of Colonel James Rhodes, otherwise known as War Machine, and of course he'd be an ally to Stark, especially since he is truly a soldier who follows orders. I don't have much to say about the character or his performance, except that Don Cheadle did a pretty good job in this film, and Rhodes is a bit more intense and pivotal than he was in the previous MCU films. I think before this he had only really shown up as War Machine in maybe Iron Man 2 and a little bit at the end of Age of Ultron, and it's like, okay. So Jeremy Renner reprises his role as Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, and in this film he is actually allied with Rogers. Renner gave a much-needed performance in this film. He's in the fight despite being retired, but he feels that he has an obligation to the Scarlet Witch because, you know, stuff happened in Age of Ultron. I'm not going to spoil, but basically, he feels like he owes her. Chadwick Boseman makes his MCU debut as T'Challa, the Prince of Wakanda, who is also the country's protector, the Black Panther, and he's an ally to Stark in this film. He serves as a third party in this conflict, a fresh set of eyes who wasn't embedded with the Avengers and has a very different point of view than either Stark or Rogers. And he's honestly, excuse me, he's with Stark for a very specific reason. It has nothing to do with politics. It's, let's say it's revenge. You'll have to see the movie to actually know what it's talking about, but Boseman actually gives an amazing performance in this as the role, and he gives off an air of regality as well as showing that there is depth to the prince, being torn between needing to live up to the traditions and legacy of his father and the country of Wakanda, and how things need to happen in the present. Boseman actually developed his Wakandan accent himself, which shows just how dedicated he was to this role. Paul Bettany reprises his Avengers Age of Ultron role, Vision, and for those of you guys who don't know, he's an android. He's a pretty powerful android at that. And in this film, he's an ally to Stark. He has some pretty surprising character development. Vision is beginning to explore what it means to be human and what love is. Vision supports regulation for logical reasons, believing that there to be a causality between potential world-ending events and the Avengers. He feels that oversight should not be dismissed as an option. Elizabeth Olsen returns as Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch, and she's allied with Rogers. So, while Olsen gave a terrific performance, I still have the same complaint with her as I did in Age of Ultron. I felt like her Eastern European accent was kind of weak and went all over the place, and occasionally took me out of the movie because of it. But her character, she's finally coming into her own and starting to understand and have conflict with how she wants to use her abilities. Paul Rudd reprises his role as Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man, in this film, excuse me, and in this one he's allied with Rogers. Though he gets a lot of less screen time than most of his other co-stars, Rudd stole the show pretty much in every scene that he was in. A great comedic value to the story. The character even has one of the greatest moments in the film, and it involves doing something that could kill him, but he believes in Rogers so much that that Lang is willing to die to make sure that Rogers accomplishes his mission. The most surprising addition to the cast was that of Tom Holland as Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, who is just starting out as our favorite web-swinging hero, and in this film he's allied with Stark. Hearing that Sony and Disney were to collaborate in this film and future films to where Spidey could actually be a part of this universe was very hard to believe, but when I actually saw it in that, it was either the second or third trailer, I was content with what I saw. I was happy. However, I was worried that we would get a horrible rendition, but I'm actually happy to say that Tom Holland's rendition of teenage Parker and his alter ego is, in my opinion, the best portrayal that we've seen on the silver screen so far. And he hasn't even come out with his full-length movie, so I'll actually know if I actually love him the amount that I think that I do in 2 months? Yeah, but anyway, I'm sure Mallory is probably in pain hearing me give praise to Tom Holland. She didn't like him very much. I think it was mainly because she thought that his speaking voice was extremely annoying, but I didn't have that problem with Tom Holland. I think he did amazing. And Spidey, like Black Panther, actually does bring a new perspective to the story. Only, like Black Panther, and the other Avengers, he's not connected to the politics of the conflict, and he's not in it for revenge or anything like that. His choice to join was due to the personal relationship that he had with Stark. The last of the main characters is the antagonist, and honestly, this is a movie about superheroes fighting each other, so you don't necessarily need an antagonist. However, I do think that he was needed in this. He's Helmut Zemo, played by Daniel Bruhl, and I will not say too much about his role in the film, but just know that he is a behind-the-scenes sort of villain, and he knows that he can't go up against the Avengers himself, especially in person, because he's just a human. These are titans compared to him. He is just a little guy up against a titan. It's David versus a shit ton of Goliaths. But he works in the shadows and finds ways to undermine the Avengers. I honestly thought that he was one of the best villains in the MCU with actual depth to him and clear motivations. With the positive reaction to Captain America the Winter Soldier and the studio's faith in the Russo brothers, the directors, they were rehired 3 months before Winter Soldier was even released into theaters to do the next film in the story of Steve Rogers. And that meant that, like Winter Soldier, the film was going to focus more on more practical effects, stunt work, which makes me extremely happy because they're trying to honor the feeling of naturalism and to honor the feeling of reality in film. As for what subgenre this film is, it can actually be seen as a psychological thriller with influences from movies like Fargo and Seven, and with slight political theming sprinkled throughout, especially because of the political ramifications of the regulation and the fact that The Winter Soldier, the film, is tied to pretty much all of this. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. And then, you know, all the destruction that's happened throughout, mainly by the Avengers. As for the film having pretty much every Avenger that has ever, you know, been on screen, well, almost every Avenger, fans and the media likened the film to basically Avengers 2.5, but I don't believe that's the case. When you break it down, it's a very simple story, and because of that, the film is actually able to accommodate that many characters, and to ensure that these amazing characters' interactions happen without the audience feeling overwhelmed. And this is still a Captain America film, and for those who haven't seen it, will see that this is in fact a direct sequel to Winter Soldier in ways that I don't even think they will expect. Also, just as a quick fun fact, Civil War was actually the first film to use IMAX's digital 2D cameras. The main theme of this film is betrayal. The film hinges on that emotion, and it's great that the directors didn't want the film to become about politics and people arguing about platitudes and what have you. Nearly 20 visual effects studios collaborated in this film, compared to the 6 that worked on Winter Soldier. The ones that are primarily responsible for it is I don't know why I'm blanking. Oh yeah, it's Industrial Light and Magic, Lucasfilm's visual effects arm, and it was primarily responsible for the large-scale battle at the airport, and that scene, in my opinion, is the best fight scene that we've ever seen in a superhero movie as, hold on. Okay, May 2017, so far, and I honestly don't think that it's gonna be rivaled until maybe Avengers Infinity War? I honestly have no idea. But the reason why it was so good was because they took risks with the visuals, the cinematography, and the stunt work. Henry Jackman also returns to compose the film score, and it's another great of his. He felt that the film was tonally different from Winter Soldier, so he decided that he wanted a much more symphonic and orchestral score compared to the Winter Soldiers, which was more thematic and heroic. And in the climactic battle, the score can actually be described, by me at least, as somewhat operatic and classical in nature. Also, instead of having character-centric themes, or perhaps faction-centric themes, Jackman composed a new main theme for the film, using it to balance everything out, a generic theme towards which all of the characters can gravitate towards. It helped wrap all of them up, and it helped to bind the movie together rather than do endless, disparate themes. Jackman also wrote a thriller theme that appears whenever the mystery surrounding Zemo's plan is explored a bit, and honestly, if you know anything about film scores, you can tell that it's inspired by some of the works of Jerry Goldsmith. Recap: Captain America Civil War is a true masterpiece, and in some ways I feel that it is actually a better film than Winter Soldier, but honestly I'm still gonna consider it not really a standalone film. It is, but it is basically in a way an Avengers film. So I will still consider Winter Soldier to be the best MCU standalone film, but that's beside the point. I still think that this film is better than Winter Soldier, and this is one thing that a lot of trilogies have not done, where usually with trilogies, what happens is that the first one is really good, then the second one goes above it, and then the third one kind of goes down a bit, but it's still good. For me, I can only think of 2 trilogies that actually got better as each film went, and it's this trilogy and The Lord of the Rings. This film is actually one of my top 4 films of 2016. The most mature and substantive film that the MCU has released thus far, and a fantastic conclusion to one of my favorite trilogies. Thank you guys so much for watching and just listening to me ramble on and on about shit. But I must ask, what did you guys think of Captain America Civil War? Did you love it, hate it, were you indifferent of it, have you not seen it yet, etc.? It doesn't matter. I want to know your opinions and thoughts. I welcome new perspectives. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more reviews and content. There is always more to come. And for other ways to support the channel, check out the description below. Farewell until the next video. Bye.